That fundamental belief that we are all in this together. We need to look out for community members, look out for our schools, look out for our business leaders and our small businesses on Main Street. On schools, the current governor did not do a reopening plan, no public health standards to help our communities and our schools, kind of left them on their own. And I think that has led to a degree of chaos at the local level. You know, folks who sign up for school board, they're not epidemiologists. They're signing up in good faith to serve the public, and they needed support in public health standards, and they didn't get that under this current administration. So that's number one. Number two is we need to make sure that the relief money gets out into the community to our small businesses on Main Street. You know, early on in the process, Senator D'Alessandro and I wrote and encouraged the current governor to prioritize small businesses on Main Street, including restaurants and hospitality, who's getting particularly hit by COVID. And they need a bridge to get through this winter to the spring. They weren't prioritized, just a different perspective in how to move forward. And so also we need things like paid family and medical leave insurance to make sure that we help out our business community, help out working families. We had bipartisan legislation, Mike, on this, 3 pieces of bipartisan paid family and medical leave insurance legislation. All 3 were blocked by the current governor, but that would help people right now and small businesses who want to retain those workers. If those workers, they're trained, they need to take time for a family member, either dealing with opioid addiction or cancer or have a new baby or dealing with COVID. Mm-hmm. And so we put together a comprehensive bipartisan legislation on paid family and medical leave insurance that would have really helped right now in COVID. Unfortunately, the current administration, the current governor, blocked 3 bipartisan pieces of legislation.
The states responded amazingly well. And by that, I mean the citizens, not just the team in Concord. I think folks know between Dr. Chan and Lori Chevronet, myself, the men and women of the National Guard, all the different folks that really came into play. We were able to create a playbook, because there was no playbook for any of this, figure out what to do, what the needs were, create metrics and accountability, and move forward very transparently. And that's been, I think, one of our biggest success points. We are far from taking a victory lap here, but there's no doubt our COVID numbers are still some of the lowest in the country. Our economy is one of the strongest in the country. We take the COVID pandemic very seriously, and I think we've kept that very elevated message. So one of the best things I'm most happy about is the response of the citizens. Understanding that they wear their masks, they maintain their social distancing. We have to make some sacrifices, but if we do that at the right time and the right pace, we can also create flexibility for ourselves. And the citizens are what I think have dictated the success that allows us to keep building. Now, as we go forward, back in May, we were predicting numbers would go up, and they are. They're not going up as fast here as they are in the rest of the country. We still only have a 1% positivity rate. That's great. Very, very, very low hospitalizations and fatalities. That's great. But we are in this for the long haul, and that is 2 months from now, you're going to look at maybe a vaccine just starting to hit the market. Over the winter and into the early spring, it gets more and more prevalent. We get more of it, more folks maybe will start taking it. So I'm not sure where this goes exactly, other than to say we got a long way to go. And I think the hope is that by spring of next year, we're really coming back to what normal is, and normal will be very different. But we've had a lot of success. And while other states are digging out and letting the dust settle, I think we're coming out of this like a rocket in a very positive way, with some new guidelines and maybe some new stipulations, but with a strong economy, safe communities, lots of jobs, and a strong economy is what gives government really the opportunity to do what it needs to do in terms of cutting taxes and all that kind of stuff. So, where we've been a bit disappointed might be, working with the federal administration has had some great points and a lot of failures as well. FEMA especially, I've been pretty hard on. Didn't really come through with some of the testing and the PPE that we were told was going to come at the quality and level that we expected it. So I went out, created my own pathway. We've become one of the best states at buying PPE, especially overseas, bringing it in and making sure our citizens had what they needed. So just being able to kind of say, well, Washington isn't necessarily always going to deliver for us. I mean, Congress has been a very big disaster, I think, given that they haven't done anything since March. I mean, literally since March, Senate and Congress hasn't passed a single bill to help COVID, to innovate, to design some sort of solution. So a lot of expectations were set. They didn't really come through. States as individuals, I think, had to come through and kind of create our own path. And we did very well here, to be sure. So I guess the message is you got to manage. You got to have a management experience. Can't rely on other folks to come through during times of crisis. If they do, that's great. But you can't always rely on it. But the citizens here, the businesses, and the partners we've been able to build have been an awesome success for the state. Long way to go, but we're doing well.
Well, first, a few things. The budget is a reflection of our values. And I think we got to protect property taxpayers here in the state of New Hampshire, protect our communities in the state of New Hampshire, advance education. We secured the biggest public school education budget in state history, $140 million in new education spending. The current governor vetoed but ultimately accepted it. And that helped Manchester, that helped Derry, that helped surrounding communities in a significant way. We got to protect that budget and build off of it. We need to continue to supply the support to our communities. So there's a number of different things to do. One is to continue down the pathway of business tax reform, which I think you're familiar with, Mike, where we lessened, generally speaking, the burden on businesses physically located in New Hampshire, and then closed the loopholes for multi-state, multinational corporations that were selling products or services into the state of New Hampshire. So they pay more of their fair share, while businesses physically located in New Hampshire get a little relief. Mm-hmm. That kind of business tax reform, I think, makes good sense. Continue down that pathway to support our businesses here in New Hampshire, support property taxpayers here in New Hampshire, and to make sure that we look out for working people and working families. And Mike, I come from a working family, working class family. My dad worked in a furniture factory for 45 years, same one, on air conditioned, doing the same job, day in and day out. My mom, she did part-time work, including the night shift, while raising 4 kids. And right out of law school, I served as a legal aid attorney with New Hampshire Legal Assistance, fighting for workers and working families, managing the Housing Justice Project of New Hampshire Legal Assistance, working on workforce affordable housing, and in the state Senate for 3 terms and as majority leader of the state Senate, building budgets that work for working people and working families. We need to build off of that and look out for them. And just one more thing on this. During the last economic crisis, the Great Recession, I was serving as the manager of the Housing Justice Project at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, managing the casework, battling Wall Street banks who were foreclosing on business owners and residents all across New Hampshire, helping people out. But what I saw during that crisis under a different legislature, Bill O'Brien, was dramatically scaling back the support for our communities and the support for our business community and workers and families. And I saw what happened on the ground. At a time when people needed the help the most, they got the help the least. So on day one, we need to manage this budget to make sure that we look out for people that are suffering right now. And that's what I'll do. I saw the impact on the ground during that crisis and this economic and public health crisis. Those folks who are falling through the cracks need some help. We need to protect property taxpayers. We need to move forward and move forward together.
As everyone knows, you cannot use our current CARES Act dollars to fix the state budget. That's not allowed. No states are allowed to do that. That's been very clear. I know other folks on the other side of the aisle keep saying so. It's just not. I wish it was. But it's not. We had over $500 million problem about 6 months ago. We managed. We created opportunities. We created efficiencies in government. We created opportunities for businesses. That's down to somewhere between $150 and a $200 million issue right now, which compared to the billions and billions that our friends to the south in Massachusetts have. My point in saying all that is other states are going to need massive amounts of revenue replacement, city, state, town level. We don't necessarily need that here. It would be nice if we got a little help, great. But even if we don't, as we started the conversation, I've learned not to bank on Washington for anything. So even if it doesn't come, we have ways we can manage. We can find the efficiencies. We don't need to do mass cuts of programs. We've managed our economy and our situation so well so far. We're on a very positive track. So even if nothing were to change, we have to manage a couple $100 million. I think we're on a much better track. Do you know in October, our revenues surpassed our original budget and plan. So if we stayed on a track like that, I'm not counting on it, but if we stayed on a track like that, we could be in a very, very good position. And again, it's just about finding efficiencies, managing well. We've done a great job. Last year, we did a great job as the pandemic hit. We had to kind of look at the programs, find if it didn't cut any programs. I can't cut a program without the legislature, and they all went home. So we didn't cut anything, but we looked at cash management and cash flow, and that alone saved us millions. So we were able to, I think, be innovative in how we went about it. There are certain things we can never cut and never touch, I think. I mean, we'll work with the legislature on all of it, but mental health, SUD, DCYF, the Division of Children, Youth, and Families, DD Community. These are the types of programs that in a tough economic times usually need a little extra help. So we've been very adamant about pushing forward on those programs. We've inherited really broken programs in 2017. We've gotten them finally working again. Pandemic kind of threw a wrench in everything, all parts of our lives. But as we come out of this thing, we got to get back to understanding where those priorities need to be and just make tough decisions.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I think what we've seen around the country and in different communities, if there's a gradual increase to it, not just jump right away, that the impact is lessened. And so that's what I support, a common sense approach to raising it. And in fact, from small business leaders and small business owners that I've talked to, generally support that. I say, Dan, I support increasing it, but just don't jump right away to 12 or 15, do it gradual. So that's the approach I support. And I think as a general proposition, no one should have to work full-time and live in poverty, which is what's happening in New Hampshire. And in fact, we have a new definition of essential and frontline worker. And a lot of folks in grocery stores are essential workers. A lot of folks, janitors and other working folks are essential workers, and they need to be treated with respect and dignity and not be working hard and living in poverty. So it's a pretty basic baseline proposition. The other thing, too, is more money in people's pocket means more money in the local economy. It's not, if you're a low to middle income worker, you're not really, unfortunately, saving a lot. You're spending that money, generally speaking, in the local economy, which helps business activity in the local economy. And now, obviously, as you mentioned, the current governor and I have a difference of opinion on this. I support a gradual common sense increase. He does not support even reinstating New Hampshire's minimum wage. And in fact, when he vetoed 2 minimum wage bills, he actually took a pay raise for himself as governor of $31,000 while vetoing the minimum wage. I don't think that's right. I think that sends a wrong message. And I've said I will reject those pay raises that he took, that the current governor took, and I will return that to the state treasury, and unless and until we reestablish and raise the minimum wage for our workers and our families.
For businesses.
Moving the minimum wage to $15, as the other side is proposing, would be a disaster for our economy. There's no doubt about that. One of the number one metrics that correlates to minimum wage would be your poverty rate, right? Well, we have the lowest poverty rate in the country. We have virtually nobody making minimum wage. You can have absolutely no experience, even in the middle of this pandemic, walk in and become a dishwasher for $12, $13 an hour, right? And that's as low as you're going to find right now. So by creating a strong economy, minimum wage isn't really an issue here. The few people that are making minimum wage might be a high school worker that's making tips, or an entry-level worker making tips, or something like that. So it's not that nobody makes minimum wage. I think it's 0.2% of our workforce is on minimum wage, and even then, 80% of those are off minimum wage within a couple months. So it's very, very rare that you're making minimum wage, usually very extreme circumstances. And that's because we don't have the government force wages upon businesses, because businesses, when you allow them to compete, end up paying every dollar they can for good workers. Nobody can find workforce right now. It's unbelievable. So they're paying top dollar as they can. Dan Feltus has absolutely no management experience in anything. He's never managed anything. He's never had to read a P&L or understand what the dynamics of a balance sheet mean. And so when you're going through and going to manage a multi-billion-dollar budget, you have to understand you can't run the state like a business, but you can bring those principles into play. And to understand that there's only so much you have in your labor pool, right, as a business, whether you're running a flower shop or you're running whatever your business, your BAE, right? There's only so much in that labor pool, and when you start doubling minimum wage, you create labor compression. Something has to give. It's jobs, it's hours. So it creates job loss. It creates loss in hours. It creates a net loss in overall wages in your community. And study after study after study, whether you look at what happened in Seattle or San Francisco, and some of these cities that mandated these massive minimum wages, the cities became completely unaffordable. Everyone lost jobs and hours because of it. It's a nice political talking point, I suppose, but look around in the state. I don't think it's getting them anywhere because people know who's making minimum wage. Very, very few folks. We have such a strong economy. We have some of the highest wages in the country on average for a household. Those are all great metrics, and that's where, again, we have that not because the government says so and tells a business how to run themselves. It's because we let business do what they do. We let them compete. And that's why all these businesses want to be here. That's why all these families want to move here.
It's a competitiveness issue. Absolutely. You just hit the nail on the head, Mike. And when the vacancy rate nationwide is roughly 5% in rental housing, in New Hampshire, it's about 1.4%. In most communities, it's on the I-93 corridor, it's actually 0%. Which means you can't find a place to live, and if you do, no pun intended, the prices are through the roof. It's a workforce issue. We've made some strides in the last budget. As Chair Ways and Means, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, Majority Leader, we put together a budget that we dedicated the first $5 million in real estate transfer tax revenue to the Workforce Housing Affordable Housing Fund. For the first time in New Hampshire history, a dedicated allotment, similar to what surrounding states do, says New Hampshire's open for business for workforce affordable housing to increase supply. And that leverages private and federal dollars to the tune of 7 to 12, depending on the project. The current governor didn't like that idea, but we put it in the budget and we kept it in. We got to protect it and build off of it. That's part of my housing plan that we put forward. Another part of it is to make sure that we deal with some of the practices at the local level that are fairly unreasonable, unreasonable, impact fees or density limitations. But we also need to expand access to families as well. That will loosen up the market in a way that makes sense, including doing for the first time ever state-based Section 8 vouchers to families that need it, and provide an incentive to landlords on their business profits tax to take Section 8 vouchers. That we know these are just good common sense steps to move forward in our housing market. And as someone who led the Housing Justice Project at New Hampshire Legal Assistance and worked on these issues, and in the state Senate for 3 terms, made bipartisan progress, including on accessory dwelling units, as you may remember, making sure that folks have an opportunity to use in-law apartments and use the available and existing housing stock to further workforce and affordable housing. We got that done. We've made some progress, but this has only gotten worse in COVID. No doubt about it. And as some housing advocates say, housing is where jobs go to sleep at night. We need the housing. We need the supply. So if you want to folks want to take a look at our housing plan online, danfeltusnh.com. We have our housing plan up. As far as we can tell, it's the first campaign for governor that put forward a housing plan. And so we need to move forward on it. It is a workforce development issue. Part of it, too, Mike, is we set aside about $1 million of the increased allotment to the Workforce Housing Fund to develop workforce housing along the I-93 commuter rail corridor. I'm a big proponent of commuter rail. That is another distinction between me and the current governor. We need to move forward on commuter rail up I-93 and make sure that we use it as an opportunity to do workforce housing along the corridor. That just makes good sense. Other jurisdictions that have done this have pursued that too. And so that could facilitate the kind of public-private partnerships that we need to move forward on workforce development and economic growth.
Last couple questions while we still have time. In terms of issues that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, as you noted, homelessness is certainly one of them. And we feel that here in Manchester for sure. And I'm wondering what you see the state's role in addressing this issue is in our cities across the state, which tend to act as the safety net for all of our communities.
Yeah, the state needs to step up, Mike. And under the current governor, that hasn't happened. And in fact, recently the current governor rejected an application from the city of Manchester to renew the homelessness outreach and coordination function to reach out and to work with the homeless population, which I've worked with as a legal aid lawyer and also in the state Senate. So there hasn't been a partnership from the state on this. The state, under the current governor, has left the city of Manchester on its own and left all of our communities on its own. And in fact, the homeless camps around the courthouse, that's state property. Nothing has been done. And I've toured the homeless encampments with Chief Goonan down along the river and talked with folks down there. And look, what they need is leadership. What they need is a true partner on housing in the corner office. And like I said, rejecting this grant, the current governor rejecting this grant, and also coming down to Manchester on August 31st, 2019, and actually attacking Manchester, that's not what folks want or need. We need leadership, we need partnership, working together in a collaborative way. You're not gonna get everything right, but you gotta give it a shot. And that's what I'll do as governor. And I think there's so much opportunity to work together. Again, I'm honored to have the support of Mayor Craig in this race for governor, and the support of a lot of folks on our front lines, including our state troopers and state police, including a bunch of labor unions and folks working in the trenches to help on these issues.
So I created a workforce housing bill in the last session that because of COVID, it never really got a public hearing. We're going to bring that bill back. And what that bill did is it looked at not just Manchester or Concord or Nashua, it really looked at every city and town across the state. No city and town can be exempt from the responsibility of creating quality workforce housing. Because if you don't do that, the businesses aren't going to come. If the businesses don't come, you don't have a tax base, the whole system starts to fall apart. So what this bill did was created incentives through tax credits with the private sector that allowed hopefully incentivize, not with a stick, but with a carrot, if you will, incentivize those public-private partnerships between the cities and towns and those businesses to create and invest in the workforce housing. One of the major problems that we have is that certain towns get it. Rochester, Londonderry, Salem is doing some good stuff. Certain towns are building that product, and certain towns are saying, not for us. No, we're not going to have an apartment here. God forbid we should have an apartment. It's very old school thinking. It's very 1995 thinking. And ultimately, it just hurts your community in the long run. So we're trying to kind of re-educate, if you will, all the cities and towns, all the planning boards, not, again, through a stick, but through punitive measures, but really incentivizing them to make those investments. Because at the end of the day, that's the bulk of your tax base, inviting those businesses in. And when you are at we're already at 3.8% unemployment. It's just unbelievable. We were at 17% a few months ago. So already we're seeing massive amounts of workforce pressure that we had pre-pandemic is already building up. But if they can't live anywhere, they can't work, right? And this is just workforce housing for nurses and engineers and the run-of-the-mill folks, everyday type folks. People come to New Hampshire so they don't have to commute a long ways away. So folks across the state have to make those investments. Small town of Walpole or Jaffrey, there are little towns across the state doing a really good job of making those investments, doing it in the right way, right? Mm-hmm. That fit the context and the culture of their town. But there's new ways of doing all of this. It becomes more affordable, more sustainable, better materials. They become really, really great projects to be proud of. And we want to bring those models to all the cities and towns across the state.
Well, thanks. I think this is absolutely critical. Look, I just talked about the absence of the current governor not just partnering with our communities, but actually attacking them. But at the State House, it's the same thing. Look, we passed 79 pieces of legislation in the legislature, 65 of which had bipartisan support. 24 of which, Mike, had unanimous bipartisan support. And I'll just give you two quick examples. One is net metering, which would help town of Derry, would help Manchester, help surrounding communities in terms of setting up solar facilities on landfills, reducing costs. That net metering legislation was bipartisan. There were 3 bipartisan net metering legislation. And as I said with the current governor in debate the other night is that the failure to move forward on a lot of this stuff, it's not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. It's an issue with the current governor. It literally is. And so, and I can tell you the night that I decided to run was the night that that we had a veto override vote on addiction treatment services. We had passed that 24-0 in the state Senate. People came together, majority leader, everybody came together, Democrats and Republicans, to help with addiction treatment services, including help with housing in Manchester. That was part of the bill. It was Senate Bill 5 in 2019. We passed it 24-0 in the Senate, passed it out of the House, big vote. Current governor vetoed it. We scheduled the veto override right away because these were needed services to get out to Manchester and our communities. And the current governor went into their caucus, and this is public now, and said, your vote on veto override, it's not about the issues or your constituents, it's about me and protecting my veto. Literally. And all that hard work that we had put into that, folks flipped their votes. I went home and talked to my wife, Erin, and I'm an upbeat guy, but I was not that night. And she said, well, what are you going to do about it? There's only one thing you can do about it, is run. If we're going to move forward, on everything we care about, we got to win, literally. And that's why I decided to run that night, literally. So we need to work together. There's nothing, people do that at the State House. You've seen it. People do it. The obstacle is the current governor.
Well, I got to tell you, I take a lot of pride in, I think, the success that I've had bringing folks together. I think people understand our transparency. They understand that at the end of the day, when you throw politics aside, you're getting rid of that very negative variable. And that's why we've been so successful. And my opponent always says, boy, the governor vetoed all those bills. Well, you bet I did. There was over $1 billion of taxes and fees and electrical surcharges and all that kind of stuff. Of course I'm going to veto that all day long. But look at what we've gotten done. I signed more legislation in 2019 with a Democrat-run legislature than Maggie Hassan ever did. I'm not knocking Maggie, of course, but I'm just trying to show, look at all that we have gotten done. We had a lot of success, whether it was, ensuring that folks were protected with pre-existing conditions, whether it was the COLA, the cost of living increases we did for municipal employees, which was very successful, working across the aisle. We've done a lot together, and I think that's why we've been successful. I think people know me. They've gotten to know me, I think, a lot, especially over the pandemic. They know my approach. They know my style. Folks might not agree with the politics all the time, but I call the balls and strikes like I see them every single time. And I give everybody, regardless of political party, the same shot. Every time they walk in the door, here's how we're going to sit down and work things out. And if you can keep politics out of the equation, we're going to be successful as a state. And if you remember what the New Hampshire advantage is all about, right? Limited government, local control. The job is not about us as individuals. The job is so much bigger than us. The job is about those individual cities and towns, those individual businesses, those individual citizens. They need to come first in the equation. And when you do that, that usually helps get politics out of the mix.